for a few months. Imagine 70 years of not meeting together, all purposed by the Lord. All purposed by the Lord so that they would understand this is true worship. God is extremely concerned with how you and I worship. The whole world is at rest, but Israel's not, because they're not home. And how long, O Lord, till we come home? And so that is the first vision with the horsemen, is the question of how long. And then God works through that. The next vision we see is the horns and the craftsmen. So what are horns? Horns are usually were symbols of power and pride. There is an interpretation on who are the four horns. Could it be a group of people? A lot of scholars have suggested who are these four that's talking about. There's debate on that. We aren't really sure, but what we do know for sure and where we could land and where I think is the safest to land is that word four is really important. All the nations hate God's people and war against God's people. They have since Adam and Eve, and they will all the way until God sets everything correct and right. This is why Jesus said, don't be surprised when they hate you. They hated me first. 1 John chapter 3, verse 13 said, do not be surprised that the world will persecute you. They persecuted Christ first. This is part of it. And so as nations warred against Jerusalem, God is reminding the people, even amidst the exile, even amidst their warring against my people, I was still in control. What good news is that, church? What good news that even in the worst of times, God is still in control. Then we get to chapter 2. And so chapter 2 is really important, and this is where biblical theology is really helpful for you and I to understand what is going on. Remember, Genesis chapter 1, God creates. Genesis chapter 2, God, the more specific area of God's creation was the more specific area of God's creation, mankind. And what is mankind's purpose? To multiply the earth, right? To be fruitful and multiply. And remember, God tells Adam and Eve, you guys can do whatever you want. What you cannot do, though, is you cannot eat of this tree. Genesis chapter 3, you see the fall of man. What do? They eat of the tree, and they have fallen. They have been cast down, they have been cursed. And so all from Genesis 4 all the way to Revelation is bringing us back into Jerusalem, bringing us back into Eden, bringing us back into original where Adam and Eve fell, bringing us back. And that is only possible, therefore, through the cross. And so when we see this measuring line, what is he measuring? He's measuring the new Jerusalem, the new city. And so it's hard for us as 21st century humans to really understand that, because we don't understand the language that is discussed by God when it comes to his city. Israel, I love you. He gave Israel the land. Israel, I have chosen you. I give you this land. It is Israel. Remember, Israel's the size of New Jersey. It's a small little country, and this is God's promised land, and Jerusalem was destroyed. And so you see the measuring of Jerusalem and all the inhabitants. And what does he tell them? This is so beautiful. Verse 4, Jerusalem shall be inhabited as villages without walls because of the multitude of people. Think about what's been happening. You have Nehemiah rebuilding the wall. And what is he saying? Man, I'm going to bring people back to where the walls we built can't even contain them. This points forward to what? That there's going to be Gentiles, the promise of Abraham, that your seed, your children will outnumber the stars of the sky. This is the good news right here, friends. This right here, that walls will not be able to contain my people. And this is what you and I as Gentile believers experience, that we were grafted into the promises made to Jerusalem, and that walls cannot contain us. This is why Jesus says, go into all the world and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Why? Because there can't be a country or a wall that contain God's people. They are all over. And that's the good news of what is going on. And then we see verse 11. I love verse 11, chapter 2. And many nations shall join themselves to the Lord in that day. That's you and me. And shall be my people. And I'll dwell in your midst, and you shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me. The Lord will inherit Judah as his portion in the Holy Land, and will again choose Jerusalem. Verse 13. Be silent, all flesh before the Lord, for he has roused himself from his holy dwelling. What is the best news? That God can dwell with us. That's the best news we can have. That God dwells with his people. I want to just share with you. This is the promise, the Abrahamic promise, the promise of Jesus. Lo and behold, I will be with you. I want you to understand, regardless of how bad things are, Christian, you have confidence and hope because God has not left you. And the greatest joy you can have is not where you are dwelling, but who is dwelling with you. And Yahweh himself dwells with his people. I don't know of better news, even amidst the worst of times. Chapter 3, love chapter 3. You have Joshua, the great high priest. Joshua is the English translation of this word, Yeshua. You know this word very well in the New Testament, in the Greek. In the Greek, it's translated Jesus, Jesus, right? Like this is the word that we would know that Jesus was called. Remember, Jesus, Joshua, Yeshua, all these are the same word. What does it mean? It means God saves, right? And so what we see is we have this Joshua the high priest. Obviously what is happening here is Zechariah is helping us understand, all right? And I want you all to get around this. Zechariah is helping us understand who Israel is. Remember, Israel was the priestly nation. They were God's chosen nation to be what? The priestly nation. What did the priests do? They interceded between party one and God. And so remember, Israel then had priests, and the priests interceded for the people. And so as Israel was supposed to be the country that interceded for all the other nations to God, here we have this great high priest, and he stands there, filthy garments, and the Satan, Ha-Satan, Satan, he comes. And what does he do? He brings an accusation. These garments are filthy. These garments are filthy. That is his cry against the people. These garments are guilty. Is Satan wrong? Not at all. Not even wrong. He's absolutely 100% correct. The garments are guilty. And I love verse 2. And the Lord said to Satan, the Lord rebuke you, O Satan. The Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebukes you. Is not this a brand plucked from the fire? What is God saying here? And this is very important. You read Romans chapter 8. What do you see in Romans chapter 8? Who can bring a charge against God's elect? You see this in Revelation, right? When you stand before God, the question is do you have the mark of the beast or the mark of the Lamb? Those who have the mark of the Lamb will suffer the wrath of the beast. Those who have the mark of the beast will suffer the wrath of the Lamb. And so what do we see here being true? When you get to Revelation, in the great throne room of judgment, what happens? As God is judging people, he's judging them based on one question: what covers you? Is it the blood of the Lamb, or is it your filthy garments? And what does God say here to Satan? He said, you have no place to accuse my people, for this is my chosen one. I have chosen this person here. And this is the beautiful part of chapter 3. And this is the gospel, friends, that Jesus Christ stood in our place at that cross. He took our debt. He took our filthy garbs. He put it on himself, John chapter 1, and the word became flesh. He took on our filthy clothes so that he could clothe us in righteousness. He took our place on the cross so that we could have our place with the Father. This is good news. This is what Zechariah chapter 3 is all about, that God's people are declared clean because he has declared them clean. He has chosen them. He has elected them. He has predestined them for adoption as sons. What great news is this, church? Then we get to chapter 4, the vision of the lampstands. So a few things I want you to note in chapter 4. Again, I know I'm going quick. I know I'm going very fast. But a few things I want us to notice. Number 4, the lampstands. What are they being fueled by? They're being fueled by olive trees. 2 olive trees on either side of these lamps. Olive oil was used to ignite and keep candles and lamps burning. So what is God getting at? That there is more than abundant olives to keep these lamps going, because there's 2 trees for this one. And so this is what God is saying, that the light that is shine is not maintained by us, but maintained by Him. And so if I can just encourage, this is when, remember in New Testament, Paul says, don't grow weary of doing good. And so maybe you're here this morning, you're like, I'm really tired. I'm exhausted of fighting the fight. I want to encourage you. It is God who sustains you. It is God who empowers you. It is God who helps you continue to keep going. And so this is what we see in chapter 4. These lampstands serve as a light to the nations. You've seen this before in the Sermon on the Mount. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill. You bring light to others. That's what you do. Why? Because it's Christ in you. And so you don't have to worry about your filthy garments. He's already put clean garments on you, and you are the light of the world. You, therefore, shine bright. Don't hide yourself under a lampstand. Just some closing thoughts for you. Zechariah in chapter 4, you'll notice, is confused. I don't understand what's happening. Really cool. The writer of the Bible doesn't understand what he is writing, what he is saying. That's okay. Zechariah is a hard book. I know. It's okay. The cool thing is you take it a little bit at a time, and you just ask God to open it up and reveal to you what is going on. So, a few thoughts for you on Zechariah chapter 1 through 4. I don't want you to be confused by Zechariah. It is a wonderful book, a beautiful prophecy calling us back to worship. So here's a few thoughts for you on worship. 1, we worship God in God's way, not our own. We worship God in God's way, not our own. And so what we do is we worship in spirit and in truth. You might be here and you might be listening. You might not be a part of a church that teaches and preaches the Bible. Be a part of a church that teaches and preaches the Bible, that says, thus says the Lord. A church that does not care about giving pastoral opinions, political persuasions, but says this is what God demands. This is where God lands. Number 2, God is always doing things even when we don't understand them. And they're always good. And they're always for His good. And we need to trust in this. That God is going to do things far beyond our imagination or expectation. Number 4, you're going to mess up. I think I skipped 3. Sorry, number 3, you're going to mess up. You're going to fail. You're going to feel dirty and you're going to feel often. You're going to fail and you're going to feel dirty. And it's going to happen often. But I want you to understand this. If our God is for us, who then could be against us? What court could hold any charge against God's own people? And so when you fail, not if, but when you fail, run to Christ. Run to Christ. Seek His face. Ask for forgiveness. And allow Him to clothe you with righteousness. Well, this has been hopefully a really helpful understanding of Zechariah. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I really enjoyed this, and I want to encourage you. This took a lot of study, and I know a lot of you read this and said, I don't know what I'm reading. But man, what a joy it is when you keep just working on the field of the word of the Lord, and He reveals Himself to you in a great way. You'll have a great Wednesday, and we will see you